The wind howled across the spine of the Rockies, a voice older than time itself. It carried with it the scent of melting snow and the whisper of pine resin. Below, in a shadowed valley where rivers cut through glacial stone, a giant stirred. Takoda's eyes opened slowly, catching the weak glimmer of dawn, stretching its fingers across a sky bruised with storm clouds. His breath rose in plumes, hanging like ghosts in the frigid air. Months of slumber had left him lean, ribs faintly visible beneath his thick, shaggy fur. But the fire of life burned fiercely within his massive frame. Hunger gnawed at him like a relentless predator, and instinct surged: wake, move, feed, survive. Takoda hauled his great body upright, muscles trembling as blood roared back into limbs that had lain dormant through winter's long tyranny. Around him, the world was still half asleep. Ice-crusted streams murmured beneath glassy skins of frost, and the skeletal remains of autumn leaves clung to the earth like memories unwilling to let go. The season of struggle had returned. For a grizzly like Takoda, this was more than survival. It was destiny. He was no longer a young wanderer. Years of claw and fang had carved wisdom into his bones. Yet true dominance was still beyond his grasp. In this vast wilderness, power was not inherited. It was taken, one battle at a time. Takoda tilted his head to the wind. The sense of the land spoke in a language older than words: damp soil, thawing moss, and faintly life, moose tracks somewhere upriver, the promise of fish when the salmon run began, and woven faintly through the air, the musk of other bears, rivals, threats. A low growl rumbled deep in his chest. This year would be different. This year, he would rise. With heavy, deliberate steps, Takoda descended from the crag where his den clung like an eagle's nest. The mountains stretched endlessly, teeth of stone biting into the horizon. Below, valleys sprawled like veins, feeding the beating heart of the earth. This was his home, his kingdom to be if he could claim it. The first days of spring bled slowly into the world, painting the white silence with timid strokes of green. Takoda moved with the patience of a monarch biding his time. He raided old caches where squirrels had stashed pine nuts, dug deep into thawing soil for roots swollen with stored life, but it was never enough. His body craved fat, flesh, the rich sustenance that would restore his strength and fuel the long battles ahead. Days passed. He roamed tirelessly through avalanche-scarred slopes, along rivers breaking free from their icy prisons, across meadows where sunlight trembled like spilled gold. The hunger sharpened him, honed every sense to a razor's edge. And then, one evening, as the sun bled crimson across the jagged peaks, Takoda caught ithaca attempts of blood on the wind. His head swung sharply, ears twitching, nostrils flaring. He followed the scent through a stand of spruce, paws silent as shadows over the soft loam. There, in a hollow where snowmelt pooled like liquid glass, lay a moose carcass, fresh steam still curling from the torn belly, and crouched over it, massive shoulders rolling with power, was another bear. A rival. Takoda froze, every muscle coiled. The bear was huge-scarred, thick-necked, a veteran of countless battles. The old tyrant of this valley. The bear's head lifted, jaws dripping red. For a moment, silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Then the rival's lips peeled back in a snarl that split the evening like thunder. Takoda answered with a roar that shook the trees. The clash was titanic, two mountains of muscle colliding in an explosion of fury, teeth slashing, claws carving arcs through the twilight. They reared on hind legs, towering like ancient warriors locked in mortal combat. The air filled with the sound of ripping fur, the metallic stink of blood, the bone-deep roars that rolled like avalanches through the forest. Takoda fought like a storm unleashed. Years of hunger, exile, and quiet dreams of power poured into every strike, but the old tyrant was cunning, seasoned by time. A swipe caught Takoda across the muzzle, splitting flesh. Pain lanced hot and sharp. He countered with a bone-crushing bite to the rival's shoulder. The battle raged until darkness swallowed the world and stars burned cold overhead. At last, bleeding, breath ragged, Takoda staggered back. The old bear held his ground, wounded, but unbroken. For now, Takoda turned, not in defeat, but in promise. This was not the end. This was the beginning. The weeks that followed were carved from hardship. Takoda limped through shadowed valleys, wounds knitting slowly beneath his thick fur. He fed when he could on roots, carrion, the occasional ground squirrel snatched in a blur of claws. Always, the hunger burned. Always, the dream of dominance smoldered like an ember deep in his soul. Summer came, spilling green fire across the land. Rivers swollen with meltwater sang their eternal songs. Life surged out, calves trembling on spindly legs, rivers choked with flashing salmon, meadows aflame with wildflowers. For Takoda it was a season of reckoning. Strength returned, flowing like molten iron through his sinews. His coat gleamed, thick and lustrous, beneath the high sun. His scars told a story the wind would carry for generations, and in his amber eyes burned a light fierce as the noonday blaze. He ranged farther now, claiming meadows, shadowed glens, river bends rich with salmon. Other bears crossed his path and yielded, wordless negotiations written in the language of muscle and menace. Takoda rose, inch by inch, in the hierarchy of shadows and blood. Then came the day of destiny. The old tyrant had grown careless, or perhaps age had finally curled its claws around his bones. Takoda found him near the river, feasting on the season's first salmon. Their eyes met, and the world held its breath. This time, there was no hesitation. They clashed in a storm of fury and raw strength, water exploding in silver shards as they battled in the shallows. Takoda drove forward with the relentless power of the mountain itself, his roars echoing across the valley like war drums, blow after blow, bite after bone jarring, bite until, at last, the old bear crumpled, broken beneath the weight of a rising monarch. Takoda stood over his fallen rival, chest heaving, blood mingling with the river's icy current. The sun broke through the clouds, gilding his massive form in fire. Around him, the wilderness bowed in silence. He had won, not just the fight, but the right to rule, to carve his legend into the living stone of these mountains. Seasons turned. The land wore its endless masks, green summer laughter, autumn's golden sigh, winter's white silence. And through it all, Takoda reigned. He strode the high meadows with the slow majesty of a king surveying his realm. Cubs tumbled in his shadow, rivals melted like mist before his gaze, but power was never his only hunger. Deep in the marrow of his being, Takoda understood the truth. This kingdom was not his alone. It belonged to the river's song, the eagle's cry, the whispering pines, and the eternal wheel of life, turning beneath the stars. On a day when the sky blazed with the molten light of sunset, Takoda climbed to the highest ridge. The world sprawled beneath him, wild and infinite. Wind raked through his fur, carrying the sense of rain and eternity. He raised his great head and roared a sound that rolled across valleys, shattered against cliffs, and soared to the heavens. It was not a roar of challenge, nor of conquest. It was a hymn to life, to the wild, to the untamed spirit that burns, unbroken, beneath the northern sky. And as the sun sank in a river of fire, crowning the peaks in molten gold, Takoda stood silhouetted against the dying light, a living monument to resilience, to hope, to the fierce, fragile glory of a world still fighting to remain free. The mountain monarch had risen, and his story, like the wind, would never die.